Mr. Chancellor, Sir Dr. Ruguri, President, East Central Africa Division, Seventh-day Adventist Church, our host, Vice Chancellor, Professor Philip Mayo, Board of Trustees led by Chairman Dr. Makori, University Council led by Chairman Samuel Misiani, our national and county leaders today led by His Excellency Stephen Sang, Governor of Nandi, Her Excellency Yulita Cheluyot, Deputy Governor, Area MP for Chismei, Honorable Wilson Kogo, a good friend of mine, our faculty, parents, graduating students, and the 3,800 student body that constitute the entire Baraton community. It's a real great pleasure and honor for me to be invited to the commencement and share the celebrations that the community today and for the last 4 days have been involved in. It's a very unique opportunity to be in a celebratory mood in a time that society has been engraved by fear. And so when I got the invitation, I saw a very unique opportunity for me to seek happiness. And I want to invite you today to shed off the fears, and we join hands in celebrating our children, for they have done well. To the class that is graduating today of 406 members, it is indeed, as I said, a privilege to celebrate your achievement today, because it's a unique achievement, not just graduating with a degree, but also demonstrating resilience, adaptation, because you have done your exam in a very unique time. But as we were told by the Vice Chancellor, it had to be completed online, which was you were initially prepared for, but you quickly adapted, and here we are today celebrating you. I want, on the same vein, to extend really a warm appreciation for the faculty for the great work that you do in nurturing generation after generation. Any society that doesn't invest in its young people is always busy destroying its future. So when I sit with you here, I know the sacrifice and the commitment of making us a better society. Transformation and progress is made through knowledge. And what you do in this university is just but to transmit, impact knowledge in the next generation. You have my honor and respect. Thank you very much. I was asked to speak on a very interesting subject, touching on the class motto of ordered steps to greatness, with the aim, the peak of every mountain is the foot of another, and keep climbing. 34 years ago, I was almost the same time, I was seated in a place like this, also graduating from my university. So while the students who invited me today to speak to them about this subject, the peak of every mountain is the foot of another. For them, they are looking forward. But for me, I'm looking back So as they use the weed screen, I'm using the rear mirror and reflecting on the 34 years. And I want to say, Mr. Vice Chancellor, the reason I gladly accepted this invitation was seeing the wisdom that the students who gave me this subject matter had. And I thought I would come and share with them my 34 years and demonstrate to them how relevant that the subject they have taken, how relevant it is. But on hindsight, it's only when you verify. So my life of 34 years validates and verifies their aspiration to make the peak of every mountain in their life the foot of another mountain, and not to give up and not to tire, but to keep on climbing. But more importantly was the recognition that that is not enough. A means is not an end in itself. And the issue of ordered steps to greatness of conquering mountain after mountain is what attracted me most, because that is what we normally miss. I have great friends who have conquered mountain after mountain, and I have one who have conquered Everest. And it's really great to conquer Everest, the tallest or the highest mountain on earth. But our daily lives and our careers are full of mountains, but not physical mountains. And that is why the ordered steps was the juicy part of the conversation I want to have today. Looking back, 34 years, I've had a couple of mountains, and this subject made me reflect a lot. My first mountain was proving myself in a professional career, and I was admitted to what today is Ernst & Young as an auditor. And I looked at that mountain, and I realized, truly, its peak, after nearly 3 years, became the foot of my next mountain of becoming a banker. And I tried to extract the few lessons that I could share, that I would really call today the ordered step that made me make the first mountain, the foot of the second one of becoming a banker. I was privileged to work under a British manager called Wagstaff. And my immediate supervisor was Dashak Shah. People who we never shared what one would call lace. But looking back, that peak at Ernst & Young made Dashak Shah, when he got a job in one of the leading banks, he thought he could go with me. And you can see how quickly the bridge to the next mountain, that it was the ability to conquer the first mountain that became the foot of the next mountain. Rarely do we get the next job by following your immediate boss. And then I worked on for another 3 years in Trade Bank. And again, it was a banking experience and knowledge, again, that made me to be invited to Equity Building Society then, which is today Equity Bank. my experience in trade bank became the fruit of my banking career in Equity Group today. And again, I could see it's what people could see of me as a young banker at the age of 28 that gave me what I would call a unique experience of quickly converting from a professional to be introduced to entrepreneurship, because 3 years of banking experience is not sufficient to make somebody to be trusted to lead a bank. But there was something that was seen that I demonstrated in trade bank that made me to be entrusted. And looking back today, and the Vice Chancellor have talked about my many other assignments, Equity Group or Equity Bank became the fruit of my next big assignment of serving my country. It's my work that could visibly be seen in Equity that made our third president, President Kibaki, to appoint me on the technical team that joined with Mackenzie to design our long-term vision as a country, Vision 2030. And that grounded me. Eventually, when we handed over the blueprint of the aspiration of the nation, he looked at me straight into the eyes and said, "James, you are the youngest among us. This is your vision. Be our first chairman of the delivery board." You can see how mountains get interlinked. You conquer one, and it leads to another. And I became a long-serving chairman from 2007 to 2019, being maintained by President Uhuru as his chairman of Vision 2030 until last year. And you can imagine that long service as chairman, if I may call the mountain of Vision 2030, how well it prepared me for the next mountain of being the chairman of the Health Committee, the Presidential COVID-19 Fund. How well you can really link the competences you have demonstrated in climbing each mountain and how well it prepares you for the next one. And I'm glad, as our Governor of Nandi, His Excellency Sang, said, within 2 months, we identified what needed to be done on the Health Committee, and we realized what our biggest problem was: unreliable global supply chains that were disrupted and could not be depended on, and massive global orders that made manufacturers not guarantee quality of PPEs. Within 2 months, because of the experience we had gathered in Vision 2030 Mountain, we were able to create and to request, prepare, and train our local manufacturers. And I'm happy to say all the PPEs we are distributing throughout Kenya are manufactured in Kenya, creating jobs to thousands of Kenyans and freeing the country from depending on international supply chain, and giving us the pride of reversing an import supply chain to a self-sufficient and export supply chain. Another mountain, one after the other, each becoming the fruit of the other. And of course, life is not all about working. It also includes loving. So 32 years ago, I fell in love with Jane, and she became a mountain of marriage. I entered the mountain of marriage. And as the Vice Chancellor said, that mountain became the foot of another mountain of God's blessings. And we got our 3 boys. Mountain of a family born out of marriage. One mountain is the foot of another mountain. I don't want to describe it greatness about the ordered steps that I have enumerated to you about my life. I will leave that to you to judge. But looking back, I feel I have lived a full life. I've served my family, I've served my community and my country, and I've served God in the humble way that I could serve God. And my country, Kenya, serving it became the foot of another mountain. As the Vice Chancellor said, I'm now leading a group, no longer a bank. I lead 13 companies in Equity Group. So one company became the foot of the other, and one country became the foot of the other, and now we are in 7 countries. And I trust in God's favor that before long we shall be in 15 countries. So you can see one comes the foot of the other. And that moves me from Kenya to become a regional player. And as the Vice Chancellor said, I think I'm on 4 UN advisory boards. As we speak, on the advisory board of the International Finance Corporation, the private arm of the World Bank. And I'm on the advisory board to the president of Yale University. So really, you keep on stepping from one mountain to the other. But as I said, that was not really what was significant. The significant aspect of today's talk is about the second aspect of the speech, the ordered steps. And I want just to share just 3, or let me add the 4th one. When I look back and if I was asked, what ordered steps led you to conquer one mountain after the other and have the privilege of making every peak of a mountain to be the foot of another mountain, to lead to what most would describe greatness, and with humility, which I thank God every day for giving me that distinguished recognition of providing leadership. And the first I see is about values. Really, what order our steps are the values we pick and the values we live. To me, that is the single biggest order of the steps that I have made. And I want posthumously to recognize what a great mentor and tutor my mother was, because the values that I've kept on building didn't start with me graduating. They were there, that's why I managed to get to high school. They were there, that's why I got to secondary school. That's why I graduated from primary. And I see they are the values she inculcated to me. I had built in me a very strong value system that has continued to shape my life and create this sequence of mountains. The chief among those values was about sheer hard work and equity. My mother taught me while I was still in Sunday school and grounded me on Christian teachings And she always echoed the words of Psalm 128, verse 2, "You shall eat the fruits of the labor of your hands. You shall be blessed, and it shall be well with you." Those are words she kept. And when I look today, every mountain have borne fruits. And I'm always at peace with myself, and I would say it has been well with me. And I can say I can count God's blessing one after the other. A value that my mother simply taught me, and I had tried to obey to date. That aspect has ordered my steps. And as I grew, I later learned from the famous painter, Picasso, inspiration exists. But inspiration must find you working. That's what the philosopher says. Inspiration must find you working. So through hard work, I've inspired to seek self-improvement through education, to be better positioned to change the society allowed me. And I could confess that I've lived a long life of learning. I am now a believer that when you stop learning, you start dying. Dying is not physical. Dying is relevance. Dying is inability to contribute and to engage because you are not well prepared. And that's why I treasure education a lot, because it keeps on retooling us. It keeps on renewing us. And it keeps on making us better every day. The second aspect that my mother taught me was about equity. And I'm not talking about Equity Bank. I'm talking about fairness and justice when I talk about equity. I was not very privileged to interact in a meaningful way and relate with my father because he passed on. And I can't say I have a physical recollection of how my father looked like. And I have not had even the privilege of seeing a photo. It appears that time Kodak, black and white, was not there before time. But my mother bringing 7 children that she was left to look after, she taught us it's not about eating from her cooking pot to your fill, is eating a proportionate share that allows your siblings to have a fair share. And she called that equity. The world has enough for all of us if we shared fairly and justly about equity. And that is why equity has 2 engines: an economic engine to create and a social engine to share and to create shared prosperity in society. That is why when I look back, the foundation is becoming a step. The bank has become really the foot of another big mountain called Equity Foundation. And we said Equity Group Foundation has adopted 67 county and referral hospitals and committed, whatever it takes, to supply them with quality PPEs for 18 months. That is what you call shared prosperity. PPEs that can be relied on for quality, PPEs that we have not had even a single challenge from the medics. We only hear them, we want the equity PPEs. That's what my mother taught me. She taught me that, yeah, as you take your children to the school, look within the neighbor. My neighbor became Kenya, and that bore wings to fly. Today, as we speak, we are headed to 40,000 scholarships under the Wings to Fly program. And as you can see, that has not made me any poorer. I just learned about equity. We must all learn as we start our journey from school to know when it is enough. Because when you don't detect that point of when it is enough, you tip, and we call you greedy, seeking more than you need. And if we want to be harsh, then we even physically describe you as gluttonous. That is not a human descriptive of anybody who has ever understood severity. Severity of a society is determined by how society treats its weakest. And I'm really excited that this university during this time would set time to share food with the community around it. That is what defines the relevance of this university, in addition to nurturing the next generation. So, Millie Ann Williamson once said, and our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. That is what human beings are. We are not inadequate for Corona. Corona gave me a very good opportunity to study the history of pandemics. And I went for 1,200 years so that we could prepare the bank and the group of pandemic. And that's why we took on PPEs. And I realized pandemics have been there. The last one, which was really brutal and killed almost 50 million people, 200 million people, was in 1919, almost 100 years precisely. But that was not even brutal. Go to the 14th century and look at the bubonic plague that almost wiped 70% of Europe and went on to ravage Mexico, or to almost killing 90% of the entire population. But ultimately, human beings prevail. That's how powerful human beings are. And that is what we should embrace, not to be driven by fear of unknown and uncertainty, but in faith and confidence that using knowledge, we shall always find solutions. And that is what education is all about. It's not being taught what to think, but being taught how to think, because problems keeps on changing. And I'm really glad that Baraton has focused on really critical thinking, helping students to develop the competence and the capacity and capability to solve problems along the way. And I congratulate you for that great determination. But let me sweep that issue of values aside, but say, when I look back, my life has been a life of courage. Not knowing the future, but being prepared to confront that future. And not knowing where the limits are, if I may paraphrase your greatest son from this region, but also daring to find what the limits are, seeking to know where the limits are. And that is what I want to encourage the graduating class, that we may never know where the limits are, But let's dare to test where the limits are. Let's not be cowed to leave the safe harbor, because if we fail to leave the safe harbor, we shall never discover the beautiful islands that are off the shoreline. We must be courageous and bold, and audacious if need be. Courage is a hallmark of overcoming challenges. Otherwise, we will always lose and fail to challenge obstacles unless we cross ourselves. But let me also say, I take it that among humanity, integrity and humility is a hygiene factor. I don't want to talk about integrity, honesty, and humility. Integrity and honesty makes us to be trusted. And you are nobody if you can't win the trust of people, because that is the most important currency ever to have, to win the trust, particularly of a civilized people. You can't get it better than to be trusted, because it's only when you are trusted that people are able to engage. Without engagement, you can't be anything. The second one, of course, is humility. It's a virtue that allows us to interconnect with others, because we bring honor and dignity to others when we relate with them with humility. We underestimate the power of humility, but looking back, humility has defined the quality of the relationships that I've had, because it brings equality in relationships, and humility brings honor and dignity in relationships. The second driver or creator of order of steps I've found is opportunities. You cannot stand on the sidelines and wait for your future to be crafted for you. You can't. Things don't happen. Things will happen in your life because you make them to happen. And you make them to happen by seizing and exploiting opportunities. So I want to encourage the graduating students to be on the lookout for opportunities, to be able and to develop the unique skill and ability to spot and seize opportunities. A story is told of two Harvard students that went for field study to India. And one student saw Indians without shoes and was full of empathy and sympathy. And the other student saw an opportunity of making affordable shoes. He never bothered to go and back to college to complete his education. But the rest is history. Making affordable shoes made him a great success and was his ticket to greatness. So you can see one saw opportunity, the other one missed and only felt sympathy for people walking without shoes. That ability to spot opportunities is a skill that we all must embrace and seek to have. If I've achieved any greatness by any measure, it was simply because I spotted exclusion in the financial sector. When I joined Equity, only 4% of Kenyans had bank accounts, and there were 65 banks. We were number 65 out of 65. And then I said, I'm chasing banks for 4%. Why don't I create a bank for the 96 who don't have bank accounts? And that is what today is celebrated as disrupting banking and democratizing banking. And all that I did was to redefine banking by removing the barriers that made banking inaccessible to the majority. Simply, what was keeping us out of banking? Minimum balance. I said, let's remove minimum balance. The second one was ledger fee. I said, let's remove ledger fee. Then the third one was limitations on how much you could withdraw and within which frequency. During those days, you could not withdraw more than 10,000. And once you went to the bank, you couldn't go to the bank for the next 7 days. That was what banking was. I said, let's remove these limitations of frequency and of amount and give people freedom. After all, it's their money. The rest is history. We have 60% of all bank accounts in this country. That ability to see a problem and twist it and seek an opportunity is what creates opportunities. And it's what entrepreneurship is all about. There is no success without solving a society's problem. Baraton, as a university, is solving the challenge of access to quality Christian-based education. An unique niche, you have very few competitors. And you develop very unique students, and there are parents who can only send their children to Baraton because they need more than education. That is how opportunities are sized. The bigger your greatness, the bigger the challenge you solve. So all of us who are graduating, let's think about the opportunities that there are that each of us can take to address and to create greatness in ourselves by solving society's problem. But in solving society's problem, let me also say it requires resilience and self-improvement, constant self-improvement. That is the third driver of ordering of steps. Then other than electricity, where there is a switch and you can switch on and off, everything else is hard work and patience. With His Excellency talked of equity being valued, having a balance sheet of 750 billion. I want to say, with the acquisition of BCDC in DRC less than a month ago, 2 weeks ago, we are now 900 billion shillings. God granting us favor, this year will breach the trillion shilling balance sheet. We become the first company in East and Central Africa to hit $10 billion balance sheet. Now, we have transformed from a technically insolvent equity building society 30 years ago to a trillion shilling balance sheet. What it has taken is patience, it has taken resilience, and a life of constant improvement. Those who can remember, equity is a creation of constant innovations. You can see, like, the way you responded to online learning for your students. We quickly virtualized the bank. You don't need to come to the bank. You can do everything on your phone. In just a short period of 5 months that COVID has been there, we have converted equity from the place you go to what you do on your phone. That is what we call constant improvement. But patience is important. 30 years ago, coming here, when I joined Equity, I could not have driven. I didn't have a car. I could have sought to be driven here. Let alone I could drive. But as you saw today, I flew here to be on time. What does it mean? Don't seek immediate gratification. Success and greatness requires delayed gratification. Don't spend that which you don't have. Wait until you have it in your heart. Don't live a life of debt. Live within your means. And seek an honesty of sacrificing today for a better future. And patience, knowing life is wrong. You don't need to have it all today. But the measured steps you make today create the desired future tomorrow. And be patient for that desired future to crop up for you to achieve. And lastly, after resilience, patience, and constant self-improvement, let me end up by talking about leadership and service. And I'm glad that Baraton's main focus is to create the next generation of leaders. Leadership is not a privilege. Leadership is a responsibility. And that is something that as a society and as a community, we must distinguish. That the honor to serve is a responsibility and an honor. But more importantly is the recognition that you don't need a title to be a leader. The greatest level of leadership is not a positional leadership. It is an influence leadership. Is when you lead through influence. That is when you make it to the ultimate of leadership. I was very humbled when His Excellency, the Governor, recognized me and talked about me. But he was talking of a civilian, just another Kenyan, without a position in leadership. But he never talked to me as such. He has felt my influence in his county. He can count on the number of wings to fly kids that come to Mwangi. He can see that for the next 18 months, he is assured his county referral hospital or his county hospital will not lack in PPEs. My word is my board. He knows that. That is what leadership is. And we must all distinguish leadership from authority. Leadership is best at influence, exercised through influence. And I want to look at our young scholars who are graduating today and tell them, today is your day to start the journey to leadership, because you don't need a position. You just need to influence. And start with influencing your family, and then the village, and on. You keep on practicing and becoming a greater leader. But what is the greatest limitation of leadership? The greatest limitation of leadership is managing time. We all have 24 hours. And a leader's biggest asset is time. But unfortunately, every morning we are credited with 24 hours, irrespective of whether you use the 24 hours productively or not. By evening, you can't store the 24 hours. In the morning, you'll be credited with another. The ability for a leader to optimize on time is what would make our scholars not always to assume that the peak of one mountain is the foot of the other. Occasionally, you can climb two mountains simultaneously. As I am the chief executive of Equity Bank, but also the executive chairman of Equity Group Foundations, two parallel mountains. The ability to manage time, the ability to multi-skill is what really creates greatness in leadership because of the limitation of time. The Bible says, chances you get God's favor and get 70 years. If you get 70 years, the maximum number of hours is 70 years times 365 times 24. That limits. But because of multi-skilling and using time well, I can say I've lived a full life without having to wait until I'm 70. And I still have about 15 years to go to reach 70. You can imagine how much more I can scale myself if I keep on learning how to multi-skill. And how to depend on others, to leverage on others. I started, when I joined the Equity, we had only 4 branches, and I could oversee all of them. After all, they were all in Kagema region. Today we have 400 branches spread over 7 countries. I've learned to rely and depend on others. Greatness, we multiply our greatness by the networks we create of like-minded people who we share a common purpose. People who are walking the direction you are walking. So I want to look at our graduating class and say, one of the things that will order your steps to greatness is the company you keep and the friends you keep. Seek friends that you are going in the same direction. The journey will be seamless. And it will be easy and you will enjoy that journey. And as I close, the ultimate act of greatness is in service to mankind. It is not in making money. Today, as I stand here, irrespective of what we have, the young man looking at me who is doing a fantastic job here of coordinating this event. Both of us, if I look at him, my brother come, or it's my son. Just come forward. That's very good. I was very impressed when I walked in and saw the coordination. If you look at him, I'm a chancellor of a university, like you are chancellor here. But if you look at both of us, the maximum we can wear is each a trouser, or you are wearing 2. One pair of shoes at a time. Don't live a life of primitively accumulating wealth, because life have a limit to how much you can consume. Thank you. I can only drive one car at a time. I can only sleep on one bed at a time, like anybody else.
and I can only have one plate of food at a time. And as I age, and God might multiply my blessings and the labor of my heart, I realized I had to stop sugar. I had to stop red meat. So the young man most likely will require more money for his diet than me. That is a contradiction of life. As you reach 40, sugar is not good for you, red meat is not good for you, heavy dinner is not good for you, you're becoming diabetic, blood pressure will go up. The more you get, the less you need. Then why primitively accumulate if the less you need? And ultimately, only what you need is a space of 6 by 4. And leave everything behind. So the best greatness is not in accumulating money, it's in serving humanity and society. Nobody has ever been recognized for the wealth that they made and accumulated. It's what they did for society. We learn a lot, and unbelievably, the most gifted, wisest man, or the richest man the Bible has honored, I think is Solomon. But the Bible doesn't talk about his sheep, and it talks about his wisdom and how he applied it to give fair and just and equitable decisions. That's what Solomon is all famous of, how he used his wisdom. So I want to appeal to our young generation to find comfort in serving society and making society a better place for all of us. For us at Equity Group, we always challenge each other, and we say, when the vision of equity becomes dim and gray, each of us will see beauty in our tired wrinkles, knowing that when we were given an opportunity to serve in equity, we did all we could to the best of our capability, and we shall not go to the graves with any regrets of what we never did. And that is what fulfillment of life is all about. As one American women rights leader, Elizabeth Stanton, stated, "No government can be formed without the consent of the governed." An important responsibility of leadership is always installing leaders, for no society can be better than its leaders. A society is a mirror reflection. That is a service that all leaders must be. Our society has had a big challenge. The elite thinks queuing is demeaning to vote, but that is a civic duty, a service to society, so that society can always have the leaders it deserves. We always complain, but we are the creator of the problems we complain about by not exercising our service to creating the next leaders. And finally, I want to quote Mike Twain, who said, "The two most important days in one's life is when you were born and the day you know why you were born." Graduating class, seek purpose, seek relevance, and you shall have known why you were born. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you and to join you in celebrating your graduation. Thank you.
God's gonna trouble the water. Water, wade in the water. Water, wade in the water.
Wade in the water. Wade in the water. Wade in the water. Oh, God's gonna trouble the water. Trouble the water. When he looks at the children of Moses, God's gonna trouble the water. Oh, wade in the water, wade in the water, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water.
Wade in the water. Wade in the water, children.